The house had been dead for years before we got there. That's what we told ourselves. Mara found it on the third day of walking a two-story farmhouse set back from a county road outside what used to be Grinnell, Iowa. The windows were dark. The porch had that specific sag that means nobody stepped on it in seasons. Waist-high grass in the yard. A mailbox so rusted the flag had fused in the up position, like it had been waiting to send one last letter to a world that stopped collecting. There were 6 of us by then. Not a family, not friends. Just people who'd ended up walking the same direction when the highways became corridors of stalled metal and shuffling bodies. Mara was the one who'd been walking longest. Mid-40s, compact, a former veterinary technician from Des Moines who'd been on foot since day 2. She didn't talk about what happened in Des Moines. None of us asked. She moved like someone who'd already made the decisions that cost the most, and everything after was just distance. Carl and his nephew Terrence had joined us outside Newton when we found them trying to siphon gas from a pickup that had 3 infected trapped behind its locked doors, their fingers working at the window seals with that slow, patient repetition. Carl was 62. Bad knee. Thick forearms from decades of something physical he never specified. Terrence was 19. Quiet in the way young men get when they've seen something that burned the casual talk out of them. Then there was Dana, who I'd been with since the beginning, since the evacuation center at the University of Iowa Fieldhouse collapsed inward on day 1, when what they were calling aggressive patients broke through the intake barriers and turned a shelter into an abattoir. Dana and I weren't together. We'd been sitting in the same row of folding chairs when the screaming started. We ran in the same direction. That was the entire foundation of our bond. And 3 days later, it was stronger than anything I'd had with people I'd known for years. The 6th was me, Nathan, 34. I taught high school history in Iowa City. I mention that because it's the last fact about my old life that still felt true. Everything since had been footsteps and silence, and that low-grade nausea that comes from scanning every tree line, every window, every doorway for movement that shouldn't be there. "Structure looks intact," Mara said from the road, not moving toward it yet. She always assessed before approaching. I'd learned to trust that pause. Could be occupied. Carl leaned on the walking stick he'd cut from a branch 2 days ago. His knee was worse every morning. No vehicle, no garden, no noise. Mara listed the absences. If someone's in there, they're either dead or not eating. We approached in the formation that had become automatic Mara first, Dana and me flanking, Carl and Terrence at the rear where Carl's pace wouldn't slow the point. We carried what we'd found. A tire iron, 2 kitchen knives, a claw hammer Terrence kept through his belt loop. No firearms. We'd heard shots twice in 3 days, distant and brief, and each time the sound had pulled infected toward it like a current. The front door was locked. That was actually a good sign. Mara went around to the back while we waited on the porch listening. The house gave back nothing. No shuffle of weight, no wet breathing, no fingernails on interior surfaces. The back door's lock was cheaper. Mara had it open in 2 minutes with the screwdriver she carried. We entered the kitchen single file, and the smell told us immediately. Dust, old grease, mouse droppings. The smell of absence. Not the smell of rot, which by day 3 we all knew intimately, that sweet copper thickness that meant either a body left too long or an infected nearby. We cleared the house room by room. 2 bedrooms upstairs, both stripped of personal items. A bathroom with a dry toilet and a cabinet full of expired medications. A living room with furniture covered in sheets like a family had left for the season and never come back. A basement door in the hallway, padlocked from the outside. padlocked from the outside. I noticed it but didn't say anything immediately. We were exhausted. The last 30 hours had been walking, a 4-hour rest in a drainage culvert, then more walking. My feet were blistered through both socks. Dana had a scrape on her forearm from a fence we'd scaled to avoid a cluster of 8 infected milling around a gas station parking lot. Terrence hadn't spoken in 6 hours. We needed to stop. The house was clear. The house was dead. We locked the doors and sat on the living room floor and divided what was left of the food Carl had taken from a ransacked convenience store: 2 cans of kidney beans, a sleeve of stale crackers, a jar of peanut butter that was 2/3 gone. I didn't mention the padlock until the next morning. I wish I had. I woke to Mara standing at the hallway, staring at the basement door. Dawn light came gray through the kitchen window behind her, casting her shadow long across the wooden floor toward the padlock. "You saw it too," she said without turning. "Last night." I sat up from the couch cushion I'd pulled to the floor. My back ached in 4 places. Figured we'd deal with it rested. Who padlocks a basement from the outside? Someone keeping something in, or someone who left and wanted it sealed. She turned then, and her face had that particular stillness she wore when she was calculating odds. "There's a smell. Faint, not rot, not infected. Something else." I stood and walked to the door. She was right. Beneath the house dust and the old wood, there was something mineral, damp, like turned earth after rain. Could be a cellar, root cellar, storm shelter. I said it hopefully. Iowa farmhouses of this era often had them. Might have supplies. Might have a person. We both stood with that for a moment. The others were still sleeping, Carl and Terrence in the upstairs bedroom. Dana curled in the kitchen where she'd insisted on sleeping near the back exit. Dana always positioned herself near exits now. I'd stopped asking why. "The padlock," Mara said. "Look at it." I crouched. The padlock was a heavy master lock, the kind you'd find at any hardware store. The body was weathered, years of oxidation on the steel. But the shackle, the U-shaped bar, was bright where it met the lock body, recently opened and reclosed. Recently enough that the metal hadn't had time to match the patina of the rest. My mouth went dry. "Someone opened this," I said, "and put it back. Recently." "How recently?" "I don't know. Days, maybe a week, not months." We looked at each other across the gray hallway, and I felt something shift in the house's silence. It wasn't dead silence anymore. It was held silence. The silence of a space that contained something waiting. "We should tell the others," I said. "And say what? That someone was here before us, opened a basement door and relocked it? That could be anything. A looter checking for supplies. A previous group like us. Or someone's down there. If someone's down there and the lock's on the outside, they didn't lock themselves in." That sentence sat between us like a weight. Someone was down there, or had been, and someone else had put the lock back. Those were 2 different people. One below, one above. Neither here now, at least not the one with the key. "Do we open it?" I asked. "Not yet." Mara's voice was firm. "We assess the exterior first. Look for signs of recent habitation, tracks, trash, vehicle marks. If someone's been here in the last week, I want to know if they're coming back." That was the right call. I knew it was the right call. But standing in that hallway with the cold mineral smell leaking from beneath the door, I felt a pull that had nothing to do with logic, the same pull that had made me open my apartment door on day 1 when I heard my neighbor Mrs. Alvarez screaming, the pull toward the unknown, even when the unknown might be the thing that kills you. We spent the next hour circling the property in expanding loops. The yard was overgrown uniformly except one track a path through the waist-high grass from the county road to the back door. The grass was bent but not dead. Recovering? Maybe a week old, maybe less. One set of footprints in the soft earth by the back step, partially filled by recent rain. Size 10, maybe 11. Boot tread. No vehicle tracks, no trash, no other signs. Someone had walked here alone, gone inside, opened the basement, and left. Or opened the basement, gone down, and been locked in by someone else. Or opened the basement, found it empty, and relocked it out of some residual respect for the house's systems. When the others woke, we told them. Carl's face went tight. Terrence's hand moved to the hammer at his belt. Dana pulled her knees to her chest and said nothing for a long time. "So we leave," Carl said. His voice was flat. "This isn't our problem." "Carl." Mara's voice was careful. "We have no food left. Everyone's injured or exhausted. The next town is 12 miles. If there are supplies down there, and if there's a person down there, locked in, you want to explain to me what kind of situation has a person locked underground from the outside?" Nobody answered, because the answers were all bad. Every scenario I could construct: someone bitten and sealed below to turn, someone imprisoned, someone hiding who'd pulled the lock shut somehow from inside. Every version meant descending into the dark towards something we couldn't predict. "We could knock," Terrence said. It was the first thing he'd said in almost a full day. We all looked at him. "Just knock on the door. If someone's alive down there, they'd respond." It was so simple and so obvious that none of us had thought of it. Or maybe we'd all thought of it and hadn't wanted to be the one to suggest it, because once you knock, you've committed to hearing the answer. Mara knocked. 3 deliberate strikes with her knuckle against the wood of the basement door, firm enough to carry through whatever space lay beneath. We stood in the hallway in a semicircle, me behind Mara, Dana behind me, Carl and Terrence at the far end, Terrence with the hammer drawn. The house was silent. Morning light stretched pale across the floor. Dust motes hung motionless. Nothing. Mara waited 10 seconds, then knocked again. 3 more strikes. "Hello? Anyone down there?" Silence. Then, and I will remember this until whatever end finds me, a sound. Not a voice, not the shuffle of infected. A single, deliberate knock. From below. 1 knock returned for our 3. Dana made a sound behind me, a sharp intake of breath she immediately cut off. Carl took a step back. Terrence raised the hammer. Mara didn't move. She stood at the door with her hand still raised, and I watched her process it. 1 knock. Deliberate, responsive. That meant alive. That meant aware. That meant human, because the infected didn't communicate, didn't respond to patterns, didn't modulate. "Can you speak?" Mara called through the door. A pause, then 2 knocks. "Is that no? 1 for yes, 2 for no." 1 knock. "Are you injured?" 2 knocks. "No." "Are you infected?" 2 knocks. "No." "Are you alone?" 1 knock. "Yes." I felt the hair on my arms rise, not from fear exactly, from the strangeness of it. A person, underground, responsive and apparently uninjured, communicating in knocks through a padlocked door, able to hear us, unable or unwilling to speak. "Why won't you talk?" Carl called from the back, his voice harder than Mara's. A long pause. Then a series of knocks, rapid, more than I could count. Not a yes or no. Frustration, maybe. The limits of the code they just established. "Can you talk?" Mara tried. 1 for yes. Nothing. Then 2 knocks. No. Mara turned to face us. Her expression was controlled, but I could see the calculation running behind her eyes. Someone who can't speak, locked in a storm shelter, responding appropriately. Or someone smart enough to give the right answers, Carl said. The infected aren't smart. I'm not talking about infected. Another silence, and this one had a different texture. Carl was voicing what we were all thinking, but hadn't shaped into words that the danger below might not be the shambling, moaning kind. That a living person locked underground by another living person might be locked there for a reason that had nothing to do with the outbreak. This isn't day one, Dana said quietly. It was the first time she'd spoken all morning. Whatever world existed, where people did things like that world ended. Anyone down there has been down there through all of this. They need help. We don't know what they need, Carl replied. We don't know who locked them down there. We don't know why. Then we ask. Dana looked at me. I didn't know why she looked at me. I wasn't the leader. None of us were. But something in her expression asked me to choose. I stepped to the door. We're going to open this. When we do, stay where you are until we can see you. Don't move toward us, understand? One knock for yes. One knock. I looked at Mara. She reached into her jacket and pulled out the screwdriver, assessed the padlock's hasp. It was mounted to the door frame with 4 screws. The screws were old, the wood around them soft. She wouldn't need to pick the lock. She could just remove the hardware. Everyone ready? She asked. Carl positioned himself at the hallway's far end, back to the wall, his walking stick raised like a club. Terrence came forward, hammer ready, standing where he'd be behind the door when it opened. Dana stepped back into the kitchen doorway. I took the tire iron from where it leaned against the wall and stood at Mara's left. The first screw came out with a creak, then the second. The hasp came loose on one side, the padlock dangling. Mara pulled the hasp free entirely and set it on the floor without sound. Then she gripped the door handle. Last chance, she said. Not to the person below to us. Nobody said stop. She pulled the door open. It swung toward us, revealing a rectangle of perfect dark. Wooden stairs descending. The mineral smell came up stronger now. Damp earth, concrete, something organic beneath it. Not rot, not infection. Something like unwashed skin and stale air. At the bottom of the stairs, maybe 12 feet down, a small LED light flicked on. A face appeared in its glow. A woman. Mid-20s, maybe younger, hard to tell with the hollows under her eyes and the lank hair hanging past her shoulders. She sat on a concrete floor with her back against a wall, knees drawn up, the tiny LED held in one hand. Her other hand was raised, palm out. Universal gesture. I'm not a threat. She didn't speak. She pointed to her throat and shook her head. Then she held up both hands, empty, nothing in them but the light. We stood above her like gods, deciding whether to extend a hand into the underworld. 6 strangers staring down at one. And in that moment I felt the full weight of what we'd become. People who had to decide if another human being deserved rescue. As though we'd earned the authority to make that judgment. Her name was Joanna. We learned that from the notebook. She came up the stairs slowly, one hand raised, the other clutching a composition book, the black and white marbled kind against her chest. In the kitchen light, she looked worse than she had in the LED glow below. Thinner than anyone should be. Wrists like sticks. A bruise on her jaw, yellowed, at least a week old. She wore jeans and a flannel shirt, both too large for her, and no shoes. Her feet were dirty but intact. She sat at the kitchen table and wrote in the notebook with a mechanical pencil, then turned it toward us. "My name is Joanna. I can't talk. Thank you for opening the door. I've been down there 11 days. 11 days? Dana sat across from her. Who put you down there? Joanna wrote. A man. He found me on the road. Said he'd take me somewhere safe. Brought me here. The shelter has water and some food. He said he'd come back. And locked you in, Carl said from the doorway, not sitting. Joanna's eyes moved to him. She wrote, Yes. Did he hurt you? Mara asked. Joanna looked at the notebook for a long time. Her pencil hovered. Then she wrote, Not the way you mean. I felt something cold settle into my chest. Not the way you mean. The sentence contained an architecture of harm I couldn't see, but could feel the edges of a cruelty specific enough to require qualification. Your voice, Mara said. Were you always? No. Joanna wrote it fast. Since the third day here. I screamed too much. Then it stopped working. Screamed for 3 days. In the dark, underground, padlocked from outside. Screamed until her voice broke and didn't come back. I looked at the door we'd opened and the 12 steps descending into that black space, and I understood it differently now. Not a shelter, a cell. Dana reached across the table and put her hand on Joanna's forearm. Joanna flinched a full-body jerk that moved the table, then held still. Her eyes were wet, but nothing fell. She wrote, Sorry, not used to people. You don't have to apologize, Dana said. The man, Carl said, and his voice had shifted. Not softer exactly, but something in it had moved. What did he look like? Is he coming back? Tall, beard, older. Drove a black truck. He said 3 days. It's been 11. He might be dead, Terrence said. We all looked at him. He shrugged with one shoulder. Everyone's dying. Might have nothing to do with her. It was a fair point, and a merciful one. The man who'd locked Joanna underground might have been killed by infected an hour after leaving. Might have crashed his truck. Might have intended to come back, and the world simply wouldn't let him. The end result was the same Joanna below. Locked, screaming until she couldn't, but Terrence was offering an interpretation that didn't require a monster. Just a man with bad judgment who ran out of time. I didn't believe it. Neither did Mara. I could see it in the way she kept glancing at the bruise on Joanna's jaw, at her bare feet, at the 2 large clothes that clearly belonged to someone else. What's down there? Mara asked. In the shelter. Joanna wrote a list. Water jugs, 3 left. Canned food, some. Blankets, a bucket, the light, nothing else. No weapon? He took everything sharp out before he left. That sentence removed any ambiguity. You don't disarm a shelter against its own occupant unless you know they'll want to fight back. Unless you're keeping someone, not protecting them. We split the remaining food from below among all of us that morning. Joanna ate slowly, carefully, like someone who'd rationed so long that abundance triggered panic rather than relief. Her hands shook around the can of peaches we opened for her, and she stopped twice to press her palms flat on the table, steadying them through will. I went down into the shelter alone while the others ate. Mara offered to come, but I shook my head. I don't know why I needed to see it alone. Maybe because I'd slept above it all night without knowing. Maybe because something in me needed to witness what we'd been adjacent to, separated by 12 stairs and a padlock, while we'd eaten our crackers and slept on our cushions. It was small. 8 feet by 10, concrete walls, concrete floor. A cot with a thin mattress. 3 water jugs, 2 full, 1 half empty. 7 cans on a wooden shelf, beans, corn, peaches, soup. A bucket in the corner with a trash bag liner, the smell coming from it sharp and immediate. A wool blanket on the cot. A single LED lantern that ran on batteries. No windows. No ventilation beyond a 4-inch pipe in the ceiling that admitted a thread of outside air. No handle on the inside of the door. No way out once it closed. I stood in the space where Joanna had existed for 11 days and felt something I hadn't felt since the outbreak began. Not fear, not urgency, not the dull ache of loss, but anger. Pure and purposeful. Anger at a specific person I'd never met, who had built this containment and placed a human being inside it like a provision stored for later use. When I came back up, Mara was waiting at the top of the stairs. She read my face and said nothing. We closed the basement door, but didn't replace the hasp. Nobody suggested going back down there. Not even to sleep in concrete safety while the world above remained full of things that wanted to eat us. The shelter was available. It was defensible. It had water and food and walls that nothing dead could breach. None of us could stomach it. We stayed in the house for 3 days, not by plan, by collapse. The collective exhaustion hit all of us simultaneously once we had walls and a door and the knowledge that for a few hours, nothing was immediately trying to kill us. Carl's knee swelled to the size of a cantaloupe. Dana developed a cough that scared me until Mara listened to her lungs and said it was probably dust and dehydration, not pneumonia. Terrence slept 14 hours the first night. Joanna didn't sleep at all. I know because I was on watch the first night we kept rotation. 2-hour shifts at the front window, and at 3 a.m. I heard movement in the kitchen. She was sitting at the table in the dark, notebook open, pencil moving in faint scratches. Not writing to communicate, just writing. Pages and pages in handwriting I couldn't read in the dimness. She looked up when I came in, and her face held that particular alertness of someone who hasn't been safe long enough to believe in the walls around them. I raised a hand just passing through, and she relaxed by degrees, went back to writing. The next morning, I found 3 notebook pages folded on the kitchen counter, my name written on the outside. I opened them, expecting I don't know what. An explanation, a request. Instead, it was practical. A map drawn in pencil of the surrounding area, as she'd seen it from the truck on the way in. Roads, landmarks. A notation that said grain elevator 2 miles east might have supplies. Another that said bridge south, washed out, saw it from road. She was contributing. 11 days underground, voice gone, body depleted. And she was contributing the only thing she had information from before. The map was detailed, confident. Joanna was someone who noticed things, someone who, even in the back of a stranger's truck, heading towards something she couldn't have known would be a cell, was recording her surroundings. I showed the map to Mara, who studied it with the intensity she gave their everything. If she's right about the bridge, our southern route is gone. We'd have to loop east through Grinnell proper. Is that bad? Grinnell had 8,000 people before. However many of those turned, they're still in those streets somewhere. The grain elevator could be useful, but it's 2 miles of open ground. We didn't go that day, or the next. The house held us in a kind of paralysis that I recognized later as a decision we were all avoiding making together, the decision to move forward. Because forward meant deciding where we were going, and none of us had discussed it. We were a group united by direction, and our direction had been away. Away from Des Moines, away from Iowa City, away from the last place each of us had watched something terrible happen. But away eventually runs out. Eventually, you have to pick a toward. It was Joanna who forced it, on the third evening. She wrote in the notebook and passed it around the living room where we were sitting in the last daylight. The man had a radio in his truck. He talked about a place called Whitfield. Government camp, east. He said it like it was real. I don't know if he was lying about that too. Whitfield, Carl said. That a town? None of us knew. But Mara pulled out the Iowa road map she'd been carrying since Des Moines and traced eastward from our position. There was no Whitfield on the map, but there was a Whitfield Air National Guard station marked in small text near the Quad Cities, 90 miles east. Military installation, Mara said. If there's any organized response left, that's where it would be. 90 miles, Carl said. He didn't have to say more. His knee was barely supporting walking. 90 miles on foot through territory none of us had scouted, with no food beyond what we'd salvaged from the shelter and whatever we could find along the way. There's another option, Dana said. She was looking at Joanna. We stay here. The shelter has water. The house has walls. We wait. Wait for what? Terrence asked. And he wasn't being sarcastic. He genuinely wanted to know what we were waiting for because none of us had articulated it. The rescue that might never come? The situation that might never resolve? The world that might never go back? For the man to come back, Joanna wrote. We all looked at her. She met our eyes without flinching. If he's alive, he'll come back. He called me his. People come back for what's theirs. The sentence hit the room like a physical thing. Called me his. She'd written it without drama, without emphasis. A fact. The flatness of it was worse than if she'd cried. Then we need to be gone before that, Mara said. And that was the decision. Not discussed, not voted on. Just stated and absorbed. We were leaving. East. Tomorrow. But that night, something changed the timeline. I was on the 2 a.m. shift when I heard the truck. It was distant at first, an engine sound on the county road, coming from the west. In 3 days at the house, we'd heard exactly 2 vehicles. One helicopter high and moving fast on day 1, and what might have been a motorcycle far to the south on day 2. Engines were rare now. Engines meant intent. This one was getting closer. I moved from the front window to the kitchen, where Joanna was in her usual place at the table. She looked up and I saw her face change. Not surprise, recognition. A very specific kind of terror, the kind you only have for something you've met before. She was writing before I could speak. Black truck, it's him. I woke everyone. No voices, hand on shoulder, finger to lips, point toward the kitchen. They assembled in 60 seconds, the speed of people whose sleep has become a shallow, conditional thing. Mara was at the front window within moments, peering through the gap between curtain and frame. Headlights off, she whispered. Truck on the road, slowing. Joanna was riding fast. He'll check the shelter first. When he sees the lock moved, he'll know. We go out the back, Carl said immediately. Now, right now. In the dark? Terrence whispered. We can't see infected in the dark. We can't fight a man with a truck either. I looked at Joanna. She was still, her pencil frozen mid-stroke, and her expression was something I hadn't seen on her face before. Calculation, not fear. She was thinking. She wrote, "He doesn't know how many we are. He thinks I'm alone." Joanna, Dana started. If he sees the lock removed and the door open, and me gone, he'll search. He knows this area. He has a vehicle. He'll find us on foot. She was right. A man in a truck against 6 people on foot in flat Iowa farmland that wasn't a chase we'd win. Especially not with Carl's knee, not in the dark. "What are you suggesting?" Mara asked. "Don't let him know I'm gone. Put the lock back, close the shelter, make the house look empty. Hide. And then what? He goes down there, finds it empty." "No," I go back down. The room went silent in a way that felt physical, like the air had thickened. I watched Dana's face cycle through understanding, and then something beyond it, a horror that went past the word. "Absolutely not," I said. Joanna's pencil moved fast. "He opens it, sees me, doesn't suspect anyone else is here. You wait until he's down there with me. Then you close the door on him." She'd drawn a diagram underneath. The hasp, the padlock, a stick figure descending stairs, an arrow showing the door swinging shut, the lock going back on. She was offering herself as bait to trap her own captor in the cell he'd built for her. "No," Dana said. "No, Joanna, no. It works. It's the only thing that works fast enough. We can just leave. He will follow." She underlined each word. "He's not someone who gives up. I know him better than you do. 11 days. The truck engine cut off. Mara moved from the window. "He stopped on the road, 200 yards out. Hasn't come to the house yet." "He's watching," Joanna wrote. "He always watches first." We had minutes, maybe less, and the group fractured along a line I hadn't seen coming, not between courage and cowardice, but between 2 kinds of refusal. Dana refused to let Joanna go back underground. Carl refused to risk a confrontation with an unknown man who had a vehicle and presumably weapons. Terrence said nothing, watching Joanna's face. Mara was at the window, dividing attention between the argument and the dark outside. "It's my choice," Joanna wrote. She didn't show it to the room. She showed it to me. Held the notebook up so only I could read it in the dim light. And beneath it, she'd added, "I'm the only one who isn't scared of going down there. I already survived it." I looked at this woman, this stranger we'd known for 3 days, voiceless, thin, bruised, offering to descend back into the space that had broken something in her. Not out of submission, but out of strategy. Using the cell as a weapon. Using his expectation of her helplessness as the trap. And I hated that it was the best plan any of us had. We moved with the compressed urgency of people who understand that hesitation is now lethal. Mara took charge of the physical execution. She was fastest with her hands, most precise under pressure. She replaced the hasp on the basement door frame, driving the screws back into their original holes with the heel of her palm when the screwdriver was too slow. The padlock clicked back into place. The hallway returned to its previous configuration, sealed, silent, revealing nothing. Joanna descended the stairs without looking back at us. She carried one of the water jugs and the notebook and settled onto the cot in the position we'd first seen, her knees drawn, LED light in hand. The last thing I saw before the door closed was her face in the small light. And it held an expression I couldn't name. Not peace, not fear. Something closer to a familiar resignation worn like armor. I wanted to say something through the door, something that meant, "We're here, you're not alone. This time is different." But sound was the enemy now. Anything I said could carry. The 5 of us dispersed through the house into positions Mara designated with hand signals. Carl and Terrence in the upstairs bedroom, flat on the floor behind the bed, with the door open enough to hear the hallway below. Dana in the coat closet beside the front door, deep dark with slatted ventilation. Mara in the pantry off the kitchen, where she had a sight line to the hallway and the back door simultaneously. Me beneath the kitchen table, pressed against the wall, with the tire iron across my knees. We weren't trying to fight. The plan didn't require us to fight. The plan required us to wait until he was below ground level, then close the door and lock it. The same act he'd performed on Joanna, the same geometry, the same sound of the hasp sliding home. We waited. I heard his boots on the porch 40 minutes later. He'd watched the house for almost an hour from the road. Patient, careful. The board under his weight creaked in the same place it creaked under Carl's. I heard the front door, not the lock picking, just the small sounds of someone who had a key to this house. A click. A turn. The door swung open. Footsteps in the hallway. Deliberate, not hurried. The footsteps of someone who expected to find exactly what he'd left. I could hear him breathing slow, nasal, the breath of a large man at rest. He walked past the kitchen without pausing, past where I crouched 4 feet from his trajectory. His boots were heavy, work-worn, loud on the wooden floor. He stopped at the basement door. I heard the small metal sound of a key in the padlock. Heard the click, the hasp swinging free. The door opened. Joanna. His voice. Deep, unhurried. The voice of someone speaking to property they've come to check on. Not cruelty in it, something worse. Familiarity. Ownership. You been good? No response. Of course. She couldn't respond. He knew that. He laughed. Short, nasal. Right. Forgot. His boots on the stairs. 1, 2, 3. Descending. 4, 5. The wood groaning under his weight. The sound moving below us, below the floor, into the earth. Heiss. I was supposed to wait until he was fully down, until he'd reached the bottom, until he was far enough into the shelter that closing the door would be certain. But my hands were shaking so badly, I was afraid I'd drop the tire iron, and the clatter would be the thing that killed us all. 6, 7. I heard him reach the concrete floor, heard the quality of his footsteps change from wood to stone. Mara moved. She came out of the pantry in 3 strides, crossed the hallway, and swung the door shut in a single motion, so fluid it barely made a sound, until the latch caught. Then the hasp, the padlock, click. The silence lasted 1 second. Then a sound from below, not a voice, not a word. An animal sound. Something between a roar and a howl. And then the thunder of weight against the underside of the door, the wood shaking in its frame. The whole floor vibrated. Open this door. His voice transformed. The ownership gone, replaced by something rawer. Open this goddamn door right now. I came out from under the table. My legs weren't working properly. Dana emerged from the closet, her face white. Carl and Terrence appeared at the top of the stairs. We gathered in the hallway and listened to the man beat against the door beneath us. And for a long moment, nobody moved. Then a knock. From below. Not his fists. A deliberate knock. 1 knock. Joanna's code. She was telling us it was done. He raged for 20 minutes. The sound filled the house like weather, like something natural and impersonal. He threatened us. He'd heard our footsteps, knew we were multiple. He threatened Joanna specifically. And those threats were precise enough that Dana left the hallway and went to the kitchen and sat with her back to the wall and her hands over her ears. He bargained. He explained. He had reasons. She was confused. She was sick. He was helping her. She'd been wandering on the road, and he'd saved her life. Mara stood at the door through all of it, motionless, her face unreadable. Then he cried. That was the worst part. Not because it seemed genuine, it might have been, but because the sound of a grown man weeping in the space where he'd kept a woman for 11 days was a complexity I couldn't process. I didn't know what the crying meant, and I didn't want to know. Eventually, he went quiet. We didn't speak to him. Mara had told us not to. "Don't engage," she'd said with hand signals before it began. "Don't confirm numbers. Don't give information. Let him exhaust himself." She was right. Every word we gave him was a tool he could use to estimate our group size, to identify weaknesses, to manipulate. But Joanna was still down there with him. I wrote this on a scrap of paper and showed it to Mara. She read it, closed her eyes, and wrote back. She chose this. She knew she'd be down there with him until we opened it. "How long do we leave them?" Mara looked at me for a long time, then wrote, "Until he's no threat." What did that mean? How long did a man stay locked in concrete before he became no threat? How much of his strength would the water and canned food sustain? How long before I stopped the thought? We weren't going to starve him to death. That wasn't what this was. But what it was, how it would end. None of us had planned that far. Joanna's strategy had covered the trap. It hadn't covered the release. We moved through the first day in the house, differently now. The presence below us changed the texture of every moment. When I walked across the hallway, I was walking over him, over her. When the house was quiet, I could hear small sounds from below pacing, the scrape of the cot. Once what might have been a conversation in a single voice, his, running like water into Joanna's silence. "We could just leave," Carl said that afternoon. He said it carefully, like someone offering something they knew was wrong. "Take what supplies we need and go. Leave him locked. Leave her." "She has no voice," Terrence said. "She can't call for help. If we leave and no one else comes by, then they both die down there." The sentence was horrible and simple and true. If we walked away, we were condemning both of them. Even if Joanna could overpower him, unlikely. Given the size difference his voice implied, she couldn't reach the lock from inside. Without someone above to open the door, that shelter was a tomb for two. "We don't leave her," Dana said. And her voice had a quality in it that ended the discussion. Not loudness, certainty. The certainty of someone who'd found a line they wouldn't cross and was standing on it. "Then we stay until we solve this," Mara said. "And we solve it by separating them." That night, Mara developed the plan. She drew it in the notebook Joanna had left upstairs, a plan for opening the door under conditions we controlled. The man would need to be restrained or incapacitated. We didn't have rope. We didn't have weapons that could reliably stop a large, desperate man. What we had was architecture. "The stairs," Mara said. "They're narrow, one person at a time. If we open the door and he rushes up, the first person at the top has the advantage of height and angle." "And if he has a weapon?" Carl asked. Joanna said everything sharp was removed. Joanna said, We're trusting the woman who locked her captor in his own cell," Mara said, and her voice had an edge I hadn't heard before. "I think she's earned a degree of credibility." The plan crystallized. At dawn, we'd open the door with Terrence at the top of the stairs, youngest, fastest, armed with the hammer. The rest of us would be positioned in the hallway. We'd tell the man to come up with his hands visible, face the wall, and not move until Mara patted him down. Joanna would come up after. Any resistance, the door closed again. It wasn't a perfect plan. It relied on his willingness to comply after a night of captivity. It relied on Joanna being mobile and unharmed after a night locked with the man who'd locked her there in the first place. I spent that night unable to sleep, listening for sounds below. Once I heard what might have been Joanna's single knock, brief, soft, almost imagined. I knocked back once against the floor with my knuckle. A response came. One knock. Still there. Still her code. Still alive. The floor between us was 8 inches of wood and subfloor and air. It might as well have been a mile. Dawn came gray and cold, October in Iowa. The fields outside were brown, and the sky was the color of old steel. I'd slept maybe 90 minutes total, and my body felt like it was made of sand, granular, ready to collapse at any angle. Mara positioned everyone. Terrence at the door, hammer raised. Carl at the hallway's end with his walking stick. Dana and me flanking the stair opening. We'd practiced the sequence twice in whispers at 5 a.m. One chance. If this went wrong, we had no backup plan. Mara crouched at the door and knocked twice. We're going to open this door. You're going to come up the stairs with your hands above your head. You'll face the wall at the top and not move. If you move toward any of us, this door closes and doesn't open again. Acknowledge. Silence from below. Then his voice. Where's Joanna? She comes up after you. She's not your concern anymore. A long pause. When he spoke again, the rage was gone. His voice was measured, reasonable, almost professional. You don't understand what you're doing. That woman is sick. I was taking care of her. She's not. Hands above your head. Face the wall. That's the only version of this where the door stays open. Another pause. And then? And then you leave. This is my house. This is a house. You'll walk away from it. We'll watch you walk. You'll keep walking. I heard him breathing, calculating. The silence stretched into 10 seconds, 20. Terrence's arm was raised with the hammer, and I could see the tremor in it, not fear, just the strain of holding position. Fine, his voice clipped. I'm coming up. Mara opened the padlock, pulled the hasp, swung the door outward. Morning light fell down the stairs, illuminating them. For the first time, the shelter had been total darkness when we'd looked down before. But now I could see the wooden steps, the concrete floor at the bottom, and a man's boot appearing on the first step. He came up slowly. His hands were above his head. He was exactly what his voice suggested, tall, broad, bearded, mid-50s. Flannel shirt, jeans, work boots. His eyes moved across all of us with a speed that told me he was counting, assessing, filing. When he reached the top of the stairs, he turned and faced the wall as instructed. But his head turned. Toward me. Toward Dana. Measuring. Face the wall, Terrence said, and his voice cracked on the last word, but held. The man faced the wall. Mara patted him down waistband, pockets, boots, ankles. She pulled a folding knife from his right boot and a set of keys from his front pocket. The keys she set on the hallway floor. The knife she put in her own jacket. Joanna, Mara called down the stairs. A sound from below. Footsteps, lighter, slower. Joanna appeared at the base of the stairs and looked up at us at the man's back against the wall, at Terrence with the hammer, at the gray light above her. She climbed, each step deliberate. When she reached the top, she moved wide around the man's body, pressing against the far wall, and stepped past him into the kitchen without looking at his face. He turned his head to track her. Terrence stepped closer with the hammer. Walk, Mara said. Front door, out, down the road. Don't come back. My truck is staying here. His hands lowered. He didn't turn from the wall, but his shoulders shifted. You're robbing me, We're releasing you. Move. He walked. We flanked him, Terrence and Mara, on either side, me behind, Carl at distance. He moved down the hallway, through the living room, to the front door. He opened it and stepped onto the porch, and the morning air moved his beard, and he looked out at the county road. And his black pickup parked on the shoulder, and I saw him calculate the distance. 30 seconds at a run. If he got to the truck, the keys are inside, Mara said, reading him. You won't make it before I do. He looked at her. For the first time, I saw his face clearly, not monstrous, not hollow, just a face. Weathered and ordinary. The face of someone you'd pass in a hardware store. Someone who'd nod at you from a neighboring booth at a diner. That was the worst thing about it. He stepped off the porch and walked. South on the road, away from the truck. We watched him until the road curved and the tree line swallowed him. And then we watched the empty space where he'd been for another 10 minutes. And then Mara went inside and locked the front door and sat on the hallway floor and put her head in her hands. Nobody cheered. Nobody said anything about justice or victory. We'd done something necessary that felt nothing like righteousness. It felt like opening a wound to clean it essential and bloody and far from over. Joanna sat at the kitchen table for 2 hours without writing anything. Dana sat with her. Not speaking, not touching, just present. The kind of companionship that asks nothing and offers only proximity. The rest of us dealt with the practical. The truck. Mara went through it systematically while Terrence kept watch on the road. It was a 2009 Ford F-150 black half-tank of gas. The bed contained a locked toolbox holding a hunting rifle with 4 rounds, a machete, 2 boxes of energy bars, 3 gallons of water, a first aid kit, a hand-crank radio, and a county map with 3 locations circled in red marker. The rifle changed our math immediately. 4 rounds wasn't much, but the psychological weight of a firearm, both for us and against anything we might encounter, was disproportionate to its ammunition. The circled locations on the map were more interesting. One was the house we stood in. One was a farmstead 8 miles south. One was the Whitfield Air National Guard Station, 90 miles east, the same place Joanna had mentioned. He knew about Whitfield, Carl said, studying the map over Mara's shoulder. Circles solid. He drew it with intent. Or with fantasy, Mara said. Circling something on a map doesn't make it real. The radio, Terrence said. He'd been cranking it since Mara pulled it from the toolbox. Static on most frequencies. But on one, a preset channel, a recorded loop played. A woman's voice, mechanical and repeating. Whitfield Recovery Station active. Military personnel on site. Civilian processing available. Approach from Highway 80 corridor only. Do not approach from secondary roads. Repeat. Whitfield Recovery Station active. We listened to it cycle 3 times. Nobody spoke until it started the 4th repetition, and Terrence switched it off. It's real, Dana said from the kitchen doorway. She'd left Joanna's side for the first time. It's real, and it's east, and we have a truck. We have half a tank, Mara corrected. 90 miles in a truck that gets, 15 miles per gallon? We'd make it if the roads are clear. That's a significant if. Compared to walking? Mara didn't answer. Because there was no comparison. Walking 90 miles with Carl's knee, with our depletion, with the uninfected scattered across every mile that was a week-long death march. A truck with a half-tank was 3 hours if the roads held. But nobody said the obvious thing. Nobody said it until I did. All of us won't fit. Not comfortably. Not with supplies. The F-150 had a crew cab, technically 6 seats, but the back was tight and Carl's knee needed space. Add supplies, add the rifle accessible, add the need to move fast if we had to. 7, Dana said. There are 7 of us now. We all looked toward the kitchen. Joanna was standing in the doorway behind Dana, the notebook pressed against her chest. She'd been listening. She'd heard everything. She wrote, held it up. I can stay. You don't owe me a seat. Stop, Mara said. Not harshly, but with a finality that surprised me. You're coming. That's not a discussion. Joanna looked at her for a long moment, then wrote, I don't know any of you. You don't know me. You rescued me, and I'm grateful. But I'm a stranger. We're all strangers, Terrence said. And he said it with a plainness that made it sound like the simplest thing in the world, this fact that had defined us since the beginning. None of us had chosen each other. None of us were bound by anything except continued presence. And yet here we were, planning a drive east together, counting seats, arguing logistics. A family made of nothing but adjacency and refusal to leave each other behind. 7 fits, Carl said. I'll ride in the bed if I have to. He wouldn't, his knee couldn't take the jolts. But the offer was what mattered. The offer said, there is no version of this where we count someone out to make the arithmetic comfortable. We spent the rest of the day preparing. Mara inventoried fuel. Terrence checked the truck's mechanical basics, tires, oil, battery. Dana organized supplies into what we'd carry and what we'd leave. Carl studied the map, plotting Highway 80's distance from our position and identifying where we'd need to transition from county roads to the corridor. Joanna drew us a map of what she'd seen from the truck on the ride in road conditions, abandoned vehicles, a jackknifed semi blocking one intersection. Her memory was precise, her pencil steady. Every mark she made was information we needed. I watched her work and thought about what she'd done the night before, descending back into that space. Waiting in the dark with the knowledge that he was coming. Holding still while his boots came down the stairs toward her. The courage that took wasn't the spectacular kind. It wasn't adrenaline courage. It was the courage of someone re-entering a known horror with open eyes and a strategy, trading their own terror for other people's safety. She'd never get credit for that. No one would write it down. But I knew. We all knew. We left at first light the next morning. The decision to drive during early dawn rather than full day was Mara's infected were less active in the cold morning hours, and the low-angle light would let us see road obstructions at distance without the glare of midday. All 7 of us fit, though barely. Carl took the front passenger seat with his knee extended. Mara drove. Dana, Terrence, Joanna, and I packed the back seat close enough that shoulders touched constantly, close enough that I could feel Joanna flinch every time the truck hit a pothole and our arms made contact. She sat behind Carl, smallest space, pressed against the door, notebook on her knees. The county road was clear for the first 4 miles. Fields on either side, empty and brown, corn stubble from a harvest that was never completed. We passed 3 vehicles all abandoned, doors open, no bodies visible. One had a child's car seat in the back, the straps unbuckled and hanging loose. Nobody commented on it. At the intersection of County Road F and Highway 146, we saw the first infected since we'd entered the house 5 days ago. A cluster of 8, standing in the middle of the intersection in that loose configuration, I'd come to recognize not walking, not pursuing, just standing in the open as though waiting for a stimulus. Their bodies moved with the small, constant adjustments that distinguished them from the truly dead weight shifts, head turns, the slow opening and closing of hands. Mara didn't slow down. She took the truck wide, onto the shoulder, skirting the intersection at 40 miles per hour. 2 of the 8 turned their heads toward the engine sound. 1 took a step. By the time it took a second step, we were past. "They're slower in the cold," Carl observed. He was right. The October morning had frost on the fields. The infected's movements were stiff, delayed. Whatever animated them, whatever biological process drove their persistence, it was affected by temperature. Mara filed that information without comment. I saw her adjust the heater setting lower, preserving fuel, and understood she was thinking about the return of warmth. About afternoon, Highway 80 appeared at mile 16. The on-ramp was partially blocked by a National Guard transport vehicle, olive drab, 1 tire flat, the driver's door open, and a dark stain on the running board that I looked at and then looked away from. Mara navigated around it, tires crunching on the gravel's shoulder. And then we were on the interstate. The highway was worse than the county roads. Vehicles everywhere, some crashed, some simply stopped. Doors open like mechanical flowers that had bloomed and frozen. The center lane was mostly clear. Someone, at some point, had pushed vehicles aside to create a corridor. A snowplow, maybe, or a military vehicle. The cleared path was just wide enough for the truck. We drove at 50, then 40, then 30, as the obstructions thickened. Twice Mara had to stop, and Terrence and I got out to push a car aside, both times abandoned, both times empty. The third time, the car wasn't empty. An infected woman sat in the passenger seat, seatbelt still fastened, hands working at the buckle with a slow repetition that might have been hours old or weeks old. She turned toward our movement outside the window, and her mouth opened, and the sound she made was thin, reedy, like a bird that had been calling too long. We didn't open the door. Terrence and I pushed the car from the rear, moving it enough for the truck to pass. The sound from inside followed us for 100 yards before distance swallowed it. Mile 40, mile 50. The fuel gauge fell with steady intent. Half tank became quarter tank. The math was working, but only barely every deviation, every slow section. Every stop consumed a margin we didn't have extra of. At mile 61, the highway ended, not gradually, not through construction or exit. A section of overpass had collapsed a span of maybe 50 yards, the road simply gone, replaced by a rubble slope into the median below. Recent collapse. From the look of it, the concrete edges were fresh, unstained by weather. Mara stopped the truck. We sat in silence, staring at the gap in the world where our route forward used to be. "The county road map," Joanna wrote, and passed it forward. Her finger traced a line and exit ramp a quarter mile back. A secondary road running parallel to the highway. It would add miles we might not have fuel for. "How far to rejoin?" Mara asked. Joanna traced the route. 6 miles of secondary road to the next on-ramp, assuming that on-ramp was intact. Mara looked at the fuel gauge, looked at the map, looked at the collapsed overpass. Then she put the truck in reverse, and we went back. The secondary road was narrow, tree-lined, and silent. The kind of road that connected farming communities to the highway 2 lanes. No shoulder, fields pressing close on either side. The trees made a canopy that blocked the morning light and created a tunnel effect that made me instinctively lean forward, watching the shadows for movement. At mile 3 of the detour, we came around a curve and found the road blocked. Not by vehicles, by people. 6 of them, standing across both lanes, facing our direction. Alive, uninfected. I could tell immediately because their posture was wrong for infected. They were tense, braced, organized in a deliberate formation. 2 held firearms, a shotgun, and what looked like a lever-action rifle. The others held tools, an axe, a bat, a length of chain. Mara stopped the truck 200 feet out. "Roadblock," Carl said, unnecessarily. "They've been waiting," Mara said. "That's a choke point. They know the overpass is down and traffic has to come this way." Joanna wrote fast. "Don't stop. Go around. The field." But the fields on either side were furrowed deep, soft soil that would swallow the truck's tires instantly. We were on the road, or we were nowhere. One of the men with a firearm raised his hand. Not pointing the weapon, waving. "Come forward." "What do we do?" Dana asked. Mara's hands were tight on the wheel. I could see her running calculations, the rifle in the toolbox behind us. 4 rounds against their 6 bodies and 2 guns. Even if we got to it in time. Even if any of us could shoot accurately under pressure. The math didn't work. "We talk," Mara said. "We see what they want." She rolled the truck forward slowly. 20 feet from the line, she stopped and rolled down her window. The morning air came in cold and sharp, carrying the smell of earth and exhaust. The man with the shotgun stepped forward. 40s thin, wearing a canvas jacket and a John Deere cap. His face was weathered and not hostile, cautious, tight but not threatening. He held the shotgun pointed at the ground. "That's close enough," he said. "How many in there?" 7, Mara answered. "Armed?" Mara paused. I could feel the weight of the lie she was choosing. "Not much." "Where are you headed?" "East, Whitfield." Something shifted in his expression. Not surprise, recognition. He glanced back at the others, then returned to us. "Whitfield's real. We've sent people. They made it." "Good. Then let us pass." "Can't do that free. We're holding this road. Fuel, food, medical, you give something. You go through." A toll. They'd set up a toll on the only passable road east. I felt something complicated move through me. Not anger exactly, not judgment. These people were surviving too. Holding territory, controlling resources, making the calculus that everyone was making. But we had nothing to spare. Every gallon in the tank was the difference between reaching Whitfield and walking. "We have water," Mara said. 1 gallon. "Need fuel." "We don't have fuel to give. What's in the tank is what gets us there." The man studied us through the windshield. His eyes moved across the cab, counting, assessing. They paused on Joanna, small, visibly thin, pressed against the door. Then back to Mara. "The rifle in your truck bed. I can see the case." Mara said nothing. "The rifle. 4 of you walk, 3 ride. You make it lighter, you need less fuel, you save enough to share. Or you give the rifle and keep your people and your gas." The rifle, our only real deterrent. The thing that meant we weren't purely vulnerable. Trading it meant arriving at Whitfield with nothing but a hammer and a tire iron between 7 people and whatever else waited on the road. Mara turned and looked at us, not asking permission, asking for dissent, for someone to say no, to offer another path. Joanna wrote in the notebook and held it where Mara could see it in the rear view. "Give it. Whitfield has walls. We don't need it once we're inside." Carl nodded once. Terrence's jaw was tight, but he didn't object. Dana looked at me, and I looked at the road ahead, the open path beyond these 6 people, the miles between here and safety, and I nodded. Mara turned back to the window. "The rifle, 4 rounds. You let us through, and you let anyone else through who follows us." The man looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded. "Get it out slow." I got out of the truck. My legs shook from sitting, from adrenaline, from the morning cold. I pulled the rifle case from the truck bed toolbox and carried it forward and handed it to the man. And our eyes met, and there was nothing in his face that made him a villain. Just a man holding a road, feeding whoever waited behind him, using the only leverage geography had given him. He stepped aside. The others parted. The road opened. Mara drove through, and behind us the line reformed. And the secondary road carried us east toward the next on-ramp and whatever waited beyond it. The on-ramp was intact. The highway beyond it was clearer. Someone had definitely run a plow or a large vehicle through this section, pushing cars to the shoulders in rough, hurried shoves that left paint transfers and broken glass glittering on the asphalt. A cleared corridor, a path made by intention. Military, survivors, a single person with a large truck and a purpose? We'd never know. The fuel gauge touched the red line at mile 83. 7 miles to Whitfield by the map. Mara drove at 35 to conserve, her eyes flicking between the road and the gauge, with a frequency that made my chest tight. Nobody spoke. The engine sound became the whole world, that mechanical persistence, that meant forward motion, that meant not walking, that meant we might actually arrive. At mile 88, we saw the first signs, literal signs spray-painted on overpasses. Whitfield, 5 miles stay on 80, do not exit. Then, a mile later, military checkpoint, slow to 15, hands visible. The paint was orange, high visibility, applied in lettering large enough to read at a highway speed. Someone with training had made these. At mile 89, the barriers began. Jersey walls arranged in a narrowing pattern, funnel-shaped, channeling traffic into a single lane. The truck slowed. Mara's hands were steady, but I could see the tension in her forearms. We'd heard the radio loop. We'd seen the signs. But until we saw people alive, organized, not trying to take something from us, none of it was real. The checkpoint appeared at mile 90. 2 Humvees across the road, a gap between them just wide enough for one vehicle. Sandbags, a machine gun mounted but unmanned. And people, 4 soldiers in digital camo, helmets, rifles, at low ready. Alive, organized, official. Mara stopped the truck at the gap, and a soldier approached the driver's window. Young mid-20s, clean-shaven, which was itself remarkable. His eyes moved across the truck's interior with professional efficiency. "How many?" he asked. 7. Mara's voice was steady, and I heard something in it I hadn't heard in 5 days, relief she was actively suppressing. "Any bites, scratches, any contact with infected?" "No." "Pull forward to the yellow line. Everyone out of the vehicle. Hands visible at all times. You'll be processed through intake. The vehicle stays here." Mara pulled forward. We climbed out slowly, stiffly, into morning air that smelled like diesel and canvas and something cooking nearby. Bacon. Actual bacon, somewhere behind the military perimeter. Dana made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite a sob. They searched us, patted us down, checked our temperatures with forehead thermometers, looked at our skin arms, necks, torsos. Carl's knee got immediate attention from a medic who appeared with a compression wrap and ice. Joanna handed her notebook to the intake soldier, who asked for identification. He read the first page, her name, I assumed, and whatever else she'd written there, and his face did something subtle. He looked at her throat, at the bruise on her jaw, now fading to green at its edges. He spoke quietly into a radio, and within 2 minutes, a woman in civilian clothes appeared middle-aged, wearing a lanyard that said Victim Services. Joanna looked at me when the woman arrived. Not afraid, not asking for help, just acknowledging. This was where her path and ours diverged, at least temporarily. She was going somewhere specific, somewhere built for what had happened to her. It existed. Someone had thought to build it, even in this. She wrote in the notebook one last time and held it up toward all of us. I don't know how to thank people who opened a door. I'll try later when I have words again. Then she walked away with the woman from Victim Services. And the space she left in our group was small and enormous, and shaped exactly like her silence. Processing took 4 hours. Medical checks, registration, assignment of temporary housing in a grid of military tents that had been erected on the airfield's tarmac. They gave us food, real food, hot, from a field kitchen staffed by soldiers and volunteers. Rice, canned vegetables, reconstituted eggs. I ate until my stomach hurt, and then I kept eating. They separated us by intake group into the same tent block, which meant we stayed together. 6 cots in a canvas space that smelled like new fabric and disinfectant. We lay down, and some of us slept, and some of us stared at the canvas ceiling and listened to the sounds of a functioning human system, generators, voices, a child crying somewhere and being comforted. Normal sounds that had become extraordinary. I didn't sleep. I walked the perimeter of what they'd let us access, a fenced area within the larger station, processing separated from general population until a 48-hour observation period cleared. Through the fence I could see the broader camp. Hundreds of tents, prefab structures, vehicle depots, a communications array bristling with antennas. Smoke from cooking fires, people walking with purpose. A school or something resembling one where children's voices recited something in unison. It was real. Imperfect, military, controlled, but real. People had built this while we'd been walking. That evening, our group gathered outside the tent in the cooling air. Carl sat with his knee elevated on a supply crate, the compression wrap visible beneath his pant leg. Terrence sat cross-legged on the tarmac, looking younger than he had in days, the vigilance draining from his face in stages, leaving behind someone who was, I kept forgetting, 19 years old. Dana sat beside me on the cot we'd dragged outside, her shoulder against mine in that casual contact we'd developed without noticing. Mara stood, because Mara always stood. But her weight was different. Less coiled, less ready to move. So what happens now? Terrence asked. Nobody had an answer that extended beyond tomorrow. The observation period, medical evaluations, assignment to longer-term housing. Beyond that, what? The world hadn't ended. It had changed into something none of us knew how to live in yet. Whitfield wasn't the end of the story. It was the end of the road, which was different. We stay together, Dana said. Not a question. Carl looked at her. We weren't together before. We were just walking the same direction. And now we've arrived in the same place. Same thing. It wasn't the same thing, but it also wasn't different enough to argue. We'd been shaped by the same week, the same choices, the same nights, on the same floors. Whatever we were to each other, not family, not friends, not colleagues. It was something that existed because we'd let it exist. Because at every point where we could have split, walked faster, left someone behind, counted someone out, we hadn't. Joanna, I said. When observation clears, we find her. Nods around the circle. Whatever Joanna needed next. Whether she wanted to see us again, join us, disappear into the camp's anonymity, we'd at least make ourselves findable. Available, present. Beyond that was her choice, and we'd already learned that Joanna's choices were worth trusting. The sun set behind the tent rows, and the generators hummed to life, and lights appeared along the perimeter fence, real electric light, steady and yellow, pushing back the dark. I sat in that artificial brightness and felt something I hadn't felt in 5 days. Not safety exactly, because safety had become a concept I no longer trusted fully. Something more like permission. Permission to stop scanning the dark. Permission to let my hands unclench. Permission to be still without that stillness meaning death. I think about the door. Not the shelter door, the front door of that farmhouse. The one we walked through because we were exhausted, and the house looked dead, and we needed somewhere to stop. A house we chose because it seemed empty. A house that held a woman in its foundation, like a secret it was keeping from the sky. If we'd walked another mile, if Mara had picked a different house, if we'd slept through that first morning without noticing the padlock, Joanna would still be down there, still silent, still waiting for a man who might or might not come back. I don't know what that means about luck or fate, or the random cruelty of a world where one house has a person buried underneath it, and the next house is just a house. I don't think it means anything. I think it just happened the way everything in that week just happened, without design or justice or narrative logic. But I know this. When Mara knocked on that door and the knock came back one knock, deliberate, human, every one of us could have chosen not to hear it, could have called it the house settling, could have walked away, could have said it wasn't our problem. And we almost did. For hours, we almost did. The only thing that separates us from the people who would have left is that we didn't. That's it. That's all the grace there is, the absence of the choice we almost made.